Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited to bring you a guest today that I spoke to a while back, and I'm like, oh, so good. I've got to bring her story to all of you. Her name is Rahaleh Nassri. She is the creator of Violent Femme. She's a writer, an actor, and director. She is based in New York. And prior to writing and hosting the Violent Femme podcast, the majority of her work has actually been in theater. And she is an actor, director. She's worked in more than 30 productions, and the list goes on and on and on. She was born in Iran and raised in South Carolina and had some stints in France. So her story is going to be one of those, and you know me well at this point, that there is so much here to unpack and hear about, and it kind of hits the root of some of our biggest fears. This episode is brought to you by the Fired Up Entrepreneur Program. And this is a program that we are so proud of. The results have been downright remarkable, and we want to invite you to get a glimpse of what it is like inside this program by inviting you to participate in the Business Boot Camp, which is a 5-day free event, and get involved with this, because the pearls that we're going to be sharing each and every day are going to be the foundation for allowing you to make money, keep the money, grow the money, and strengthen not only your business, but also yourself. So please take advantage of this and join us at our next boot camp. You're listening to the Silver Lined Relaunch, and I'm your host, Hillary DeCesar, award-winning entrepreneur and transitional coach. Each week, I'll invite you to tune into inspirational stories, revealing how you too can turn ordinary experiences into the extraordinary. Feeling stuck? I'll share step-by-step strategies to fuel your ability to experience a life where silver linings are both abundant and possible. Rahaleh, welcome to the Silver Lined Relaunch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I always like to start out with having you give an overview of you, what has been part of this journey, and then leading into what is your most significant relaunch.
Yeah, so as you said, I was born in Iran, and when I was about six years old, there was a revolution there. And so my father, who had already been working with Europe, sort of got some advice from people he'd been working with. They said, you need to get out of the country now. And we were fortunate enough to be able to. A lot of people could not. And so we actually got out before the Shah fell, because he had some forewarning. And we got up and moved to first Charlotte, North Carolina. And then
what a change is that, right?
Right.
How old were you at that point?
I had just turned 7 when we got to the States, because we went to London first. And as I said, my dad was already familiar with, he spoke English, and he'd been working with people in Switzerland at the time. And he had a friend who had gone to college in North Carolina and was in Charlotte. And he said, well, why don't you come over here? And so that's where we went.
You go from where you were to showing up at age 7. So you remember all of this.
Yes. And it was, I learned English very quickly. I learned English in like 3 months, but I also had a father.
That's truly immersive, right? You're like,
well, I had no choice. Nobody spoke Farsi. So not in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you have to understand, Charlotte, North Carolina right now is a financial center. It's a fairly large city right now, but this was like 40 years ago. So it was not what it is today. It was like a very small country town. I don't know if it was country, but still.
But
So
a lot smaller. It was definitely not what it is today.
no. And my mother was very young. My mother was about 24 and my father was only 30 at the time. So and I had a younger sister. So I was the eldest, and my father was a businessman, and he was a pretty successful businessman. That's why we were able to get out of the country. And so he traveled a lot. And so I was there with my mother, who didn't speak any English, and I had to be her translator and her guide. And so I grew up there, and eventually went to school in Washington, D.C., and I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. But I think because of that initial geopolitical instability that shaped my life, I really wanted to study international affairs. And that's what I did at first. And I got an undergrad degree in that and went to work at the French embassy in Washington, D.C., because I spoke French, because we had also lived on and off in France and Switzerland sometimes. So I spoke French and I got this job. And after about 4 years, I thought, okay, well, I know where this is going. I'm going to be a diplomat and this, but what I really want to do is to do theater, because when I had been in college, I had been introduced to it and taken some classes. And it was something
So
that
you
I
knew
was,
deep down, you were like, okay, my passion is that I want to be in theater. I want to be an actor. I want to be on stage,
yes.
not international affairs.
Well, I wanted both, really. And that's why once I left my job and started doing theater, I just gravitated towards very political theater. I also loved being in Washington, D.C. There was a moment when I moved to LA, but that just wasn't right for me. I stayed maybe 6 months and I realized that, and I had an agent and everything, I just didn't like the feeling that I had there and what I had to really desire to be successful there, which I did not have. I wanted to, in a way, express myself in order to affect change in some way. So I went back to DC.
In the political landscape, that's where you were like, oh, I got to do something with theater in that.
Yes, because that was my language and that was what made me happiest. Like once I went into theater, I realized that being able to express myself in that way was very cathartic for me and something that I had needed. I was, because of the way I grew up and the experiences that I have always felt like I was fighting for something. My father, despite the fact that he modeled, everything that you preach, the silver lining relaunch, he's always able to reinvent himself or restart. He's had so many successful businesses but also failed a bunch of times and would build it back up to even greater heights each time. And so he modeled that for me. And I had a lot of expectations put on me, but I was not allowed to fail. And that's actually something.
It's really interesting because he failed in businesses and then learned from those experiences, came back and continued to grow. But as his daughter, were you the only child?
No. I had a younger sister. And then when I was 15, my parents, same parents as me, had 2 more kids. They had twins.
Oh my God. So,
a boy and a girl. So
I'm glad that didn't happen to me. Whoa.
All right. And can you imagine? My mother was 33 at the time when she had the twins, because she'd had me so young. But I thought, oh my God, what is my mother doing? She's so old and she's having kids.
So
But
nowadays it's like, yeah, that's kind of that's kind of a norm.
I have one child. I had my child at 42.
Okay, exactly. That's the norm. It's not, the young anymore. Okay, so you weren't allowed to fail. And what's interesting is I know our listeners are saying, wow, you've already had some pretty impactful relaunches, you moving out of your, home country, you coming to the States, you going from international affairs to acting to then, really trying to merge the two together, which you did successfully. But that's not even the most significant relaunch, the one that we're going to be moving into now. Can you share how this all evolved?
So I went from acting to directing, and I felt like I had found my home and just real groove in life. I was happy, and I felt like I'd accomplished something. And at that time, when I felt like I had a handle on everything, I was stalked. And it was not somebody that I really knew, because I know that a lot of women are stalked by people they know, but this was someone I had been acquainted with like 5 years before. And and
In
the
at school? Was that at school,
no,
or was that at your job, or was that in the theater?
no, it was
Acting?
it's hilarious, but for my father's, I don't know which, it was a big birthday. I can't remember. It must have been 65 or 6. I don't know which birthday it was, but I wanted to play a song. My father loves music, and there's this song that he used to sing when we were little that went like, we had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the
Of
sun. That's what it
course.
was called.
I
so
mean, don't get me started.
so I'm a performer, but I'm not a singer or a musician. And so, but I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to play this song on the guitar, and I'm going to sing my dad this song for his birthday. And so I started taking some guitar lessons, and pretty quickly, I think I took like 1 or 2 lessons, I realized that this guy was kind of creepy. And so I stopped. And then this was 5 years later, and I had just directed a show. I was walking out of the theater during a preview, right after a preview. And I saw this guy, but I didn't, it's like one of those things, I didn't really remember the entire context of how I knew him. I just said,
In a
hi, oh
place of
yeah.
safe.
And
You're
then
like, oh, how do I know him?
but I realized it eventually, but I didn't remember that I had felt creeped out by him in any way. I just remembered that I knew him and I had taken some guitar lessons from him. And so I said hi, and he was very surprised to see me. He's like, what are you doing here? I thought directors weren't here once the show opens. And I said, well, it hasn't opened. It's in previews and we still are working on it. Anyway, so he started emailing me, and eventually it got to like 20 emails a day, and then it became very uncomfortable. And at the beginning, though, I was laughing about it. And I remember I was in rehearsals for another play after that, and where I was acting, and I was with other actors, and we would look at these emails and laugh about them. And then one of my very close friends said, you're not going to be laughing when you end up dead in a river. So you need to do something about this. And so, right, it's very stark.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a change right there, right? That throws you down a different path. But at this point, had you heard about other people that had stalkers, or was this kind of like at an earlier stage? Or because now today it seems like there's a lot of stories about this coming out. Is it just that we're
This
now
was like
starting?
11 years ago.
So
And yeah, I think there were stories. I knew what stalking was. And in fact, once I went to the police, because I lived, in Washington, D.C., you have Washington, D.C., and you have Maryland and Virginia. And a lot of people live on the border in Maryland or Virginia. And I lived in Alexandria, Virginia. And so did he. He lived in my neighborhood. And so I went to the police, and they tried to scare him by going to his place of business, and that didn't work. And so the police actually recommended that I file the complaint in Washington, D.C., because they have a lot of public figures in Washington, D.C. They have better stalking laws. So I did that.
So let me ask you, how long did this go on before you're like, okay, before that person said, hey, this is all fun and games until you wind up dead? How long did it take to get to that point where you're like, wait a second, this is not feeling right? This has gone one step too far.
I would say a couple of months, and then the next 2 or 3 months, I was pursuing it because it just kept escalating. And one of the best pieces of advice that the police officer in Virginia gave me was, do not ever respond, not even to respond negatively, because once with that kind of personality, if you respond after even 95 emails, the thing that goes off in their head is that, oh, all I need to do is send 95 emails and then she'll respond.
But when you first got, let me ask this, when you first got that first email, did you respond?
Yeah, no, so at the beginning, he was emailing me, I was emailing him back, because he donated money to a theater I worked with. He asked me to be a judge in a Battle of the Bands situation and I thought, okay, well, this is how the world works. He donates to my theater, I judge this Battle of the Band. I was just engaging with another human being in a polite, civilized way. I didn't expect to later then get
these inappropriate emails, did they start to cross the line?
They were delusional. Sometimes there was violent language, and then the next one would be like, I'm so sorry, they also revealed that he was doing a lot of things that, like, I speak French, I speak Farsi, I speak Italian. He was learning because there was a lot of public information, because I was in theater in Washington, D.C. I had lots of articles about me in the Washington Post and other, online outlets and other local papers. And so he had a lot of information on me and was using that to try to get my attention. Ultimately,
so you take it to DC, the police there, because they have the stalking laws. And then what happened?
Nothing that was satisfactory, in my opinion. I did get a temporary restraining order, but then I had to go to court to get a permanent restraining order. And, but it was very nerve-wracking and emotionally debilitating for me to have to go into a courtroom with him and feel very clearly that he was enjoying that he was getting me to come into this room. And he was, he had a lawyer and I brought a lawyer, and he was fighting to be able to go to my shows, which I told the judge, I'm like, well, this just shows you that he's a stalker, because there are 500. Why does he have to come to my shows? And it turned out I didn't even know. We checked the records of a lot of the theaters where I'd worked, and he had been coming for 5 years and sitting in the dark. And it's funny because another person said to me, yeah, he would have not come out of the dark if you had not seen him that night when you were walking out.
I didn't know directors are hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So when you finally are in front of this judge and you're sitting here, you're having to defend yourself, you're saying, he's a stalker, he's doing all this. How long did it take for that to be, and then what happened? What was the final, like, where is he right now?
The first, I think after the second time, it had to be rescheduled another time. And I think it had something to do with the judge. But eventually I gave up. I did not want to go into the courtroom anymore. I know these things seem small, but in the moment, they seem huge. I was very shaken that I had to go into family court. Like, this was where the divorces happened. And I thought, well, why? I don't, this is not anybody I know. This is not my family. I'm not trying to, and that was a little disturbing. Even little things like raising your hand to say I do, it felt like, these are the words that people say in a wedding, and I have to say these. uh, it's just crazy, the emotional roller coaster that you go on. And so I decided that, and to be fair, I had gotten to a point where I say I was very happy in DC. I did feel like I wondered if there was more I could do elsewhere or in another realm. And I had wanted to write. And I had been a writer before, because when I worked at the French Embassy, I was in the press office, and I was into journalism before that. But so I wanted to try my hand at writing, and I thought, you know what, I need to get away from all this. And so
You're a public figure. You don't get away. Like, I mean, there's others of us that
but
we
I
can
was
just
already
get
canceling
away.
I was canceling any I did not take additional shows. I had one more that I was committed to in the fall. And this was like summer. I had been canceling all the smaller appearances, like staged readings and things like that. I was too scared to get on the stage. Even the shows that I did do, I remember at one theater, they had security, and they had the guy at security had a picture of the guy so that they wouldn't allow him in. And so,
Rahaleh, is he still out there?
yeah, I don't want to name. I don't want to.
No, I'm not asking you
I
to
have
name,
no idea.
and you haven't seen him in how long?
No,
Or
no,
been
I left the city. I left DC. I'll tell you, there's one more thing that happened. I left DC and I went off. I was traveling for a while writing, and then I had to come back and do this one show, which was an all-female Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, and I was playing Mark Antony. And about 5 minutes on the last, and I decided, I don't have a restraining order anymore. The temporary one had expired. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to see if I can live my life in DC and forget about this guy and see if it just goes away. And so I did the whole run of the show. And on the last night, it is about 5 minutes before I'm about to go on, and all the ladies in the dressing room were talking about who might be there. And this one girl said a name, and she said, "Oh, that sounds familiar. I saw it on the list." And I was like, I just went white. I slid down the wall and I told them. And it turned out that he had been going around Facebook friending anybody that I worked with. And so that's why she had heard the name. And so one of the other actresses went to the lobby and she told them what was going on. And the theater called him over the intercom and asked him to leave. And still, it was because I was playing Mark Antony, who has a speech to the audience, friends, Romans, countrymen. And so even though I knew that they had taken him out of the theater, I was still looking for him, scared out there. And after that is when I really decided to move to New York, because I thought, okay, where can I go and be an actress and still be anonymous? So I went to New York.
This is unbelievable. And so you now are in New York. Are you?
So what happened then is that I had an agent there and I was auditioning, but I was focusing on writing, and my agent helped me with a play that I had written. And then I opened a kids acting school. And then I also realized that I needed to have a kid myself if I was ever going to, because it was super duper late. And that's what eventually happened. And so I have a wonderful 7-year-old son now. And I had that kids acting school, and I still did some things, but ultimately with a small child, it's very difficult to do theater.
Mhm.
And so in a way, I stopped doing any theater. And around the pandemic, or just before it, I was feeling the desire to and the need to express myself again, was thinking about things. And then the pandemic hit, and that's how the podcast came about, because the violent femme, the women that the subjects of each episode, I started thinking about that a while back, in terms of maybe doing a one-woman show or writing a play with these women in history who were very interesting to me. They were not always good women. They were villains. Sometimes they were both villains and heroes. And they had committed some brutal acts and made mistakes. And when I thought about what I really want to put out there in the world next, I thought, what is really important to me? And one of the things that's really important to me is for women, because I know that I've struggled with it. I know that even though I've taken a lot of risks in my life, I also feel like sometimes I'm risk averse. Sometimes we change course because we're afraid to get really deep into the course that we're on, or if we come up against something that doesn't work on the path that we're on. And so I've taken a lot of risks, and I think sometimes it's been because I didn't want to get through the nitty gritty of something. And I feel that men are often groomed in life to do great things and heroic things. And that's part of the reason we have a patriarchy, and men have the power that women don't. And we have this issue with gender parity, and that we really need to work towards. And I know that many people might not agree with me, but part of the reason that is, I feel, is because women are not conditioned to feel power or or in any sense groomed for power, whereas men are. Men are told they can make a lot of mistakes. The stories that they hear, I'm a storyteller, so everything comes from that, but that's how everybody is conditioned, is through stories.
So I completely agree, but your story, it seems like it didn't have an end. It's still going. It's still like, this guy's still out there somewhere. You've moved on with your life. What do you say to people? And I shared with you that I have somebody, intimate in my family who's had a stalking situation, and it didn't get resolved. Seems like there is this problem out there that we as women cannot, kind of like, there isn't that end point. I mean, these people are making you live in fear. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when they're going to show up. As you said, you're in the middle of, the monologue, and boom, you hear that he's in there. What do you recommend to people now that are going through this, that potentially have somebody that they feel is stalking them?
Well, I think it's different. I mean, I think if there's any danger, I don't feel danger right now. I assume he's moved on with his life. I don't feel any danger. And, that is I guess the idea comes up sometimes. For instance, I was recently, I was like down to me and another person for this show in New York City, which was a big show. And I thought this would be the first time that I really get on stage. I did one other time, but it was a long time ago, in New York. But and something that was so public. And it was, went in 3 times and the callback and everything. And I really wanted it. And I probably would have done it if I had gotten it. But I was thinking about this all the time. I was thinking, can I get back on stage? But on a day-to-day basis, I don't feel danger right now. And I think if you're in that place, if you feel relatively safe, I don't think that you can live your life in constant fear. And for me, I remember, and I still to this day, in a way, thank my stalker, because I probably would not have my son. If I had not left DC, I would have just continued. And it's very hard to be an artist in this world and have a family, particularly if you're a woman. And
Everyone's probably thinking like, where is Hillary going with this? Where's the silver line? This is it, everybody. This is it. You course corrected. You have this amazing son. You have been able to write. You're very successful as a writer. You're successful in everything you've done. And it did come about from, having that fear that came into you and you deciding to act on it. I call it hell in the hallway, where you're kind of in that place where you're like, what do I do? Do I just keep shutting those doors? Keep going down? Eventually you hit a wall, right? Eventually there's a door you can't just keep going through. But you've moved on and you've had this opportunity. It's interesting because, again, we connected with the story and, with people these days, especially with social media, especially with wanting to be vulnerable, putting yourself out there, that people do feel like they really know you. They feel like there's that connection.
Yeah. And this was even before, but there was enough information for somebody to feel that they were a part of my life. There's, part of it is mental health. Like, he was clearly delusional in a lot of ways, and it was clear in some of the emails. But you can't remain a victim. And this is part of the reason I am doing what I'm doing now, is I feel that for women to feel powerful and have powerful, they can't stay a victim all the time. It is great for us to talk about how we have been victimized, because that is true. But at some point, if we want to take control, we have to stop playing the victim and stop being the victim. And for me, you have to always see the silver lining and see what good could come out of this.
Absolutely. So share with us how people can find you. I know through the podcast, which is amazing. And what are you working on right now?
I'm working on more episodes right now.
I'm working on. I know what you're saying. So,
no, I need to get more episodes out, because mine take a long time. I have to write them and then record them, and then they go through a post-production, the composer and everything. It's like a mini movie each episode about these different women. And so, yeah, I have to do more.
Well, I will make sure that we, in the show notes, we have that link, Violent Femme. And you are absolutely incredible. From the moment I met you, I had a strong connection with you. Thank you for coming on, sharing the story. I know that it is, it brings up every time I have to tell things from my past, it's like, oh, there it is again. But you get better and better, and it's a little bit cathartic as you go through it. It really is. So I appreciate that so much. I always like, especially you being in the acting profession and being around, people that kind of know. I'm going to ask you the question I know a lot of women love. What beauty product is your go-to right now that you absolutely love?
This is what I've loved for, I don't know how many years, at least 10, 15. Marula oil. When I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I got a lot of blemishes, and I would, dry my face out like people usually do. And then I realized that I started first using almond oil. Now I use marula oil. But I used almond oil for about 10 years and then marula oil. And,
Is there a brand of marula oil? Is
the
this
one
like
I
the
use
deep,
is Shea
briny
Terra, Namibian marula oil. And
Terra? Okay.
so marula oil is used in Africa to treat leather, but African women have been using it because it also has some sun blocking qualities.
Very nice. Well, I'm going to make sure to put this as well. And I'm now in Colorado, so my skin is like leather. So this will be good. This will be good for me. Well, again, thank you so much, Rahaleh. I mean, amazing to talk to you. Loved having you on the show. We'll have everything in the show notes. And thank you.
Thank you. It was so great talking to you. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Silver Aligned Relaunch. If I said something today that resonated with you, will you please head over to iTunes right now and leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with others and help them find the silver linings as well. And don't forget, you can have immediate access to the show notes, any giveaways, and the links to those amazing beauty products at therelaunchco.com/podcast. Until next time, there's always a silver lining, and now is the time to hit the reset button to relaunch those transitions into transformations.